guys, how are you doing? Let's continue our discussion of what is going on with the internal structure of the verb group. And so we have been talking about this idea that within the verb group, you may have auxiliary verbs. You will always have a main verb. The main verb will always be the last within the verb group, even if it's comprised of a single word. It rained. Rained is the whole verb group, and it's the whole verb phrase. It's the whole predicate of the sentence. So we know that that has to be the main verb. And in that sentence, it's in past tense because we have rained. The ed tells us past tense. So when we have auxiliary verbs, we're interested in knowing what is going on with the internal structure of the verb group such that we predict the correct order of auxiliary verbs. And so we've talked about the fact that we have modals, perfect, progressive, and now we're going to talk about passive. What is passive? Passive is an auxiliary form that is formed always with the verb be plus the past participle of the following verb. And remember, the past participle is not past tense. The past participle is just a very bad name for the form of the verb that the passive requires to follow it. So just think of it as like form Z, you know? Just think of it as having nothing to do with the meaning of anything else in English. So think of it as form Z. Okay, when you have the passive, you have a form of the verb be, and it's followed by whatever verb comes after it in the Z form, right? Just give it no significance. So, in other words, so passive auxiliary, some form of the verb be, what could that be? Well, it could be, it could be been, which we know because it's en would be the past participle form. It could be being. What is that? That's the present participle because we have ing here. And similar to the past participle, the present participle is a very bad terminology to use because, of course, it's compatible with all of the tenses. It doesn't require the present tense. So there's nothing present about the present participle. I know that sounds really counterintuitive, but that's the case. So just think about them as participle forms. Or just think about them as the Z form. That's probably more straightforward. So what else are you going to have for be? You have are, they are happy, they were happy, he is happy, I am happy. So whenever you have any of these guys, you know that if it's serving as an auxiliary verb, in other words, if it's occurring before another verb, it must be an example of the passive be. But wait a minute, we just said that the progressive auxiliary is formed with the form of the verb be. So how could that be possible, right? What is going on with the progressive versus the passive? The progressive, remember, shows up with a form of the verb be plus, after it, the ing form. Always the ing form. Whereas passive is formed with be, similar to the progressive, but what follows be is the past participle. So in other words, the en form or the ed form of that verb. So that's the crucial difference between the passive and the progressive. You have progressive only if you have ing, and you have passive only if you have a past participle, either ending in en or ed. So let's look at some examples. So you have the sentence, John was arrested. And so just to illustrate the simple passive in a sentence that doesn't have any other auxiliary verbs, we're going to have John as our sentence. John is the subject of our sentence. And so we're going to forget about John. He's not important. He was arrested. Again, we have the sequence of the verb to be plus something following it. How do we know what that thing following the verb to be is? It might be an adjective phrase, it could be a noun phrase, it could be anything that can take the shape of a subject complement, because you can say John was upset. How do you know that when you say John was upset, upset is serving as a verb or an adjective? And remember the test that we did was the very test. So you can say John was very upset. Very is serving as an intensifier for the adjective upset. And therefore, we know that we have an adjective phrase there. And what is within our verb group? John was upset. Just the verb was. That's the only thing that is a verb in that sentence. What about this sentence? Is this going to work the same way as John was upset? So you have John was upset. You're getting rid of your subject, John, and then you have was upset. You said that upset is an adjective. It's not a verb. It can't be part of the verb group. And so the only thing that you have within the verb group here is was. Since that is the only item, you're just going to label this as past tense. And we would say the form of this sentence, John was upset, is past, or what is sometimes called the simple past. And the reason that people say simple past is to distinguish that form of sentence from one which is sometimes called complex, which refers to the perfect form. So other terminology that you will see in referring to the perfect form is a complex verb tense. So when you say, for example, John left, that would be the simple past. And then you have John had left, that would be the past perfect. Why? Because you have the verb have, so you know it's perfect, and it's in the past tense because you have the D at the end. So, don't worry so much about that because that is terminology that we are not going to use for the rest of the semester. So when we have perfect, we'll always and only call it perfect. When we have past, we will always and only call it past. So you have John was arrested. Is it like John was upset? What is the structure here? So you have John as the subject, was arrested. You want to see, can you intensify this item here, arrested? Can you say John was very arrested? Right? So imagine that, you know, John is in the habit of getting arrested and you're describing this situation to your friend and, you know, you're like, oh, he was very arrested, like, again, it happened, it's always happening, these multiple events of being arrested. So you can imagine what the meaning would be, but you can't say that in English. You can't have very modifying something that is not an adjective. So that is showing us the fact that you can't say John was very arrested means that arrested is serving as a verb here. And if it's serving as the verb, then it has to be the main verb because it's the last guy in the sequence of verbs. So your verb group is going to be was arrested, comprised of main verb arrested, and then your auxiliary part, which has just the single word was. What is the function of was here? Well, it could be progressive because we know you can say John was swimming, and then was is going to be progressive. But what do we have following was? We have arrested. In other words, there's no ing there. That tells us that this is the passive, not the progressive. The progressive always, always, always has ing. The passive never, never, never has ing. So this is going to be, in other words, an instance of the passive. And what is the tense that we have here? Is the past. Because you have was. If you had John is arrested, then it's exactly the same in terms of its structure, but the only thing that you have changed is the tense. You change the past tense to the present tense. So let's look at some examples where we have multiple instances of auxiliary verbs. What if you have one passive plus another type of auxiliary verb? How do you know in which way to analyze that? So you can say Mary was being arrested. Mary was being arrested. So imagine if you have a scenario like where Mary is trying to flee the scene of the crime, and then all of a sudden, in the middle of that, the police run in, and as she's just escaping through the window, say Mary was being arrested as she was jumping through the window, or something like that. So Mary was being arrested is interesting because it shows up with a complex form in terms of the verb group. You have more than one unit there. So Mary is your subject. You're going to forget about Mary. And then we have was being arrested as our verb phrase. Again, how do we know that this material at the end is not an adjective describing the subject? Mary was being very arrested. That doesn't work. So therefore you know that arrested has to be the verbal form. And so the verb group here is going to be comprised of the main verb, arrested, and all of these guys in front, which have to be some form of auxiliary. That's the only thing that they can be if they're occurring in that position in English, the position just before the main verb. So what type of auxiliary? Well, you have was here. Therefore, you have two possibilities. It could be passive or it could be progressive. How do you know? You have to look at the following verb. Aha. I see ing on the following verb, therefore I know this is progressive. And what is the tense of this verb itself? Was is past. Because if it were present, it would be is. So this is going to be labeled as past. And then being, we see here again, the form of the verb be. Aha. Is this another progressive? Is it something different from the progressive? Well, we look at the following verb and we see, we don't have the ing here. Therefore, it cannot be a form of the progressive. You know that whatever it is, it's not a form of the progressive. And in fact, we see that arrested is the past participle. Therefore, be plus arrested tells us that we have passive. So we're going to label this guy as passive. And then if we wanted to give the label for the whole sentence, we would say this is past, progressive, passive. Past, progressive, passive. Okay, so, having talked about the passive form, we've covered all of the different possibilities for all the different types of auxiliaries that we have in English. And what I want to do now is just spend some time going through a lot of examples of different sorts so that we can get really familiar with doing the analysis of the structure of the verb. So, for example, if you have a sentence like, Paul would have been extremely upset. Paul would have been extremely upset. So first thing to do, get rid of the subject of the sentence. We want to zero in on just the verb group, just the verb material of the sentence. So Paul is out as the subject. And then we have the rest of the sentence, would have been extremely upset. Well, how do we figure out how much of this stuff goes into the verb group and how much of this stuff might be outside of the verb group? When we look at would, we know that that is a modal verb and it has the past tense marker D here. Remember, past tense form. Have looks like it's a form of the verb have and it is therefore necessarily perfect. Then, well, since we have the form of the verb be, we don't know until we look at the following verb whether it's progressive or passive. So here we look at the following verb and we see, extremely. But extremely doesn't look like a verb, right? Extremely looks like an adverb. And what the heck is this adverb doing here? So this adverb is occurring here after this verb, and that makes us feel like what's going on, So consider the next word, upset. Upset could be used as a verb, or it could be used as an adjective, or it could be used as a noun. And there are many, many words in English that function this way, that depending on their context, they're going to be either a noun here, a verb there, preposition in another case. So you have to look within that sentence what is going on with that word. So when you say Paul would have been extremely upset, notice that extremely, we said is an adverb. It's telling you the extent of Paul's being upset. Something like he's really upset. He's very upset. So notice what this adverb is here. It's an intensifier. it intensifies the meaning of the following word, which is upset. And therefore, what do we know? We know that because an intensifier always is describing something that is not a verb. For example, upset here is an adjective. Therefore, upset is not within the verb group. Why is it not within the verb group? Because it's not a verb. Only items that are verbs can be in the verb group. So, looking at the rest of this predicate would have been extremely upset. Upset is going to be left out. Extremely is going to be left out. And those would occur within the structure of the verb phrase. The whole verb phrase would include the verb group first with all its internal structure. And then as a complement, you would have the adjective phrase, extremely upset. And then you would see that that's a subject complement modifying the subject of the sentence, and so you have an intensive type. So would have been is the only thing within this sentence that comprises the verb group. And therefore you're going to want to provide the structure for this verb group. And notice that been ends up being neither progressive nor passive. Why? Because been is actually the main verb of this sentence. It is the last in the sequence of verbs. The things that you have following it afterwards are adverb, adjective, something outside of the verb group. It's not a verb. So, just as we always do, when you have anything preceding the main verb, you're going to label those as auxiliaries, and then you're going to determine what types of items are these. So, would is going to be labeled as a modal verb. We know the tense of this form is past because we have D at the end. So might, could, would, should, all of those guys are past tense. And then we have this have sitting in here. We know with have, it's kind of nice. It's not like the verb to be where you have two possibilities. Maybe it's a passive, maybe it's a progressive. The verb have, when it's an auxiliary, is always and only perfect. So this guy is going to be labeled as perfect. And then the label for the whole sentence would just be a reading off of all of those labels. So past, modal, perfect. You say that this sentence is in the past, modal, perfect. Okay, because it's basically just to say what are the different components that are occurring within the verb group. So let's look at a bunch more examples to see how things can become very complex. But even when things become very complex, we see that that order that we have for auxiliary verbs in English is always followed. We never can have an order that is different from what we pointed out at the beginning: modal, perfect, progressive, passive. That's it. That is all that English will allow us to do. So let's look at the following sentence. So Mary and her little sister have been crying all night long. Mary and her little sister have been crying all night long. Okay, Mary and her little sister have been crying all night long. What is going to happen with this sentence? Well, we're dividing first subject and predicate. We want to get rid of our subject, Mary. Is this a complete subject though? So if we say Mary and her little sister have been crying all night long, what is the sentence about? What is the topic of this sentence? It's not only Mary, it's Mary plus this other individual, the little sister. So the topic of the sentence is really this whole phrase, Mary and her little sister. We say that that is the subject of the sentence. So we've gotten rid of that guy. And then we think about what's going on here. Have been crying all night long. Well, the have looks like the perfect auxiliary. The been looks like it's either going to be passive or perfect, passive or progressive, depending upon what follows it. Crying looks like it's going to be the main verb because it's the last verb. And then what is this all night long doing? It's telling us for how long does this last, right? Does the event of crime last? So in other words, it's giving you extra information that's modifying the event itself. In other words, it's not necessary. You could have just said, Mary and her little sister have been crying, and finish the sentence there. It has a different meaning if you include that information, but you don't need to include it in order for the sentence to be acceptable. So therefore, all night long is extra information, and we're going to just cross it out. So that's not to say that it doesn't have a structure, it's just that right now we're not concerned with that structure. So just like when we were talking about verb phrases, we didn't really concern ourselves with what was going on within the verb group, because at that point we were looking at the one with just the verb phrase. So the verb group is going to be, all of our verbs have been crying, comprised of the main verb, which is crying, and all of our auxiliary verbs, which are how many here too? Have and been. First, we know that have, nicely, differently from the verb be, can only be the perfect. So we never have to worry about what have or had or having or any form of the verb have is going to be doing within the verb group. It is always serving as the perfect marker. So, and the tense is what? Mary and her little sister have been crying all night long. Again, when you're looking at, to identify the tense, just think about the form of the verb. Don't think about the meaning. So when you look at just this verb have, what you see is that you have the present tense. Because if you had Mary has been crying all night long, that has, the S at the end, that would be your third person singular present tense marker. So because you have a plural subject, you have instead the verb have. So you're going to have the present tense here for have. And then what's happening with been? Why do you have this hand showing up? Because have precedes this word, and have says the verb that follows me must be in the past participle. The past participle form of the verb be is been. So we know that this guy itself is doing what? Well, it's be, so it could be passive, it could be progressive. We have to look at the following verb, and then we see, aha, we actually have the ing form, we have progressive. So this guy is going to label as progressive. So the label for the whole sentence would be present, perfect, progressive. All right, so let's continue and look at more examples. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a couple of assignments that are basically going to do this. So they're going to give you full sentences. You're going to pick out the verb group from that sentence by first eliminating the subject, and then also eliminating anything else from the sentence that is not a verb, and therefore you have identified your verb group. And then you're going to show the internal structure of the verb group. So always to the right will be your main verb, to the left all of your auxiliaries, and then what are the types of auxiliaries that you have. So if you have a sentence like, Phyllis is inconsolable. Phyllis, I'm kind of rotating with these markers because none of them seem to want to last very long. So let's see how this is going to work. Inconsolable. Right? So Phyllis is inconsolable. What does that mean? What is going on here in terms of the subject and the predicate structure? Well, the sentence fundamentally is a sentence about Phyllis. We're giving information about the person Phyllis. So Phyllis is identified as the subject of our sentence and is not going to matter for talking about the verb group. Then we look at our predicate, is inconsolable. Well, what's going on here? The verb be, aha, is. Now we have multiple possibilities. It could be passive is, it could be progressive is, and it could be main verb is. How do we know which one it is? We have to look at what comes after it. If you have ing on the next word, it's what? Progressive. If you have en or ed on the next word, then it's what? Passive. If you have something that is neither ing or en or ed, then you know that it's the main verb. So in particular, in this instance, think about what inconsolable is doing. It's modifying the subject of the sentence. It's serving as the subject complement for Phyllis. And therefore, inconsolable is an adjective phrase in the structure of the verb phrase. So, within the verb group, the only member that you have here is the verb is. That's it. That is the only guy that is present within this verb group. So that's the only material that you need to include here. And if you thought, okay, what is the label? How would I label this sentence? It's present tense or present. Or you were saying that sometimes you see simple present. It all means exactly the same thing. You can just think about saying present tense. Okay? So that's very important because the verb be shows up with many, many different meanings. It can either appear with progressive, with passive, or it can just be on its own. It can be the main verb of the sentence. So be really careful about how you're deciding what type of verb be you have. So we'll go over a few more examples in